Stand by.
Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us here for Wildcat Chats. I'm Jackie Hartman. I served on the Alumni Association board from 2003 to 2010, and I was fortunate enough to be the chair in 2008 of the Alumni Association board. Then I returned to K-State as chief of staff, and I was very fortunate because I was able to work with our two panelists today, Linda Duke of the Beach Museum and Todd Holmberg of MCCAin Auditorium. So before we get to the questions that have been posed to Linda and Todd, I want to give you just a little bit of their background. Linda Duke came to us in 2011. She brought a wealth of experience with her as an educator. She served as the Director of Education and Public Programming for Indianapolis Museum of Art. She also was the Director of Education at the Hammer Museum at UCLA. She was the Director of Education at the Krannert Art Museum, Urbana-Champaign, and she received her Bachelor's of Fine Arts and Master's of Art History at the University of Illinois at Champaign. Todd, the Executive Director of MCCAin, he arrived at K-State in 2007. He too brought a lot of experience with him. He was the Executive Director of the Corpus Christi Symphony. He was production manager and competition coordinator for the Clyburn. You're probably used to hearing about Van Cliburn and the Clyburn prestigious classical music competition. Todd was the director of that. He also was at Blue Lakes Fine Arts Camp, and a lot of people you might know go to the Summer Arts Festival there, and so Todd was the director of that camp. And he was a performer, but before he started in the administration, he was a professional trumpet player, and it's great to hear Todd every once in a while as he plays with the big band here in town when he serves as a guest performer. He received his Bachelor of Music Education from the University of Nebraska, and then he majored in trumpet performance, and that was at the University of North Texas. So we are so fortunate to have them both with us on campus and to have them today. So thanks very much to Todd and Linda for joining us today. We've all been able to spend time walking through the Beach Museum and also been to performances at MCCAin. And we have had a great time in both of those venues. But however, due to the pandemic, like many of the places we like to visit, they've been impacted, and the beach has been closed, and MCCAin in the Performing Arts Series took a hiatus last spring and then at the beginning of this fall. So we're going to talk a lot about that today. We received great questions from those of you, some of you that had registered for today's chat. So we will go over those questions. If you have additional questions, if you can write those in the chat, we'll try to get those questions answered. If by chance we don't get to your question, then the Alumni Association staff will reach out to you with answers to your questions. So I'm going to start with Todd, first of all. Todd, we know that you schedule your performances a year in advance. Sometimes I know that you have worked with these performers and even their agents 5 and 6 years prior to bringing them to campus. So when you realized that you were not going to be able to continue the spring 2020 season, and then also that you wouldn't be able to start the fall season, tell me what you had to do. What was at the top of your list?
Well, Jackie,
Thank you very much. And I wanted to start by saying thank you to the Alumni Association for inviting me on. I think it's very important that MCCAin and the beach sort of get to tell our stories and what we've been through and what we're thinking about moving into the future. But to get into your question, Jackie, when we knew that the spring 2019 season would have to be, well, the second part of it would have to be canceled. The first thing that I tried to do is communicate with these agents that I've just worked with for so long. You're so right. Establishing these connections with these agents over many years is a big part of my job. For example, it took me about 7 years to get Yo-Yo Ma, and that was due to my relationship with that particular agent. So the first thing I wanted to do is communicate with those agents who I consider just great friends and personal friends, and we tried to reschedule just as many things as we could. So we were successful with a couple of those spring 2019 shows. We were able to push them into the fall of 2020. But of course, they ultimately did have to be canceled when we canceled the fall 2020 part of the MCCAin Performance Series. We did move one show, One Night of Queen, to the spring of 2021, but we're still kind of waiting to see what will happen to that show. So we're in a wait and see mode to see what will happen in the spring. But the kind of the sad news is most of the shows that were in the spring of 2019 that we had to cancel just kind of canceled completely, and we weren't able to reschedule them. And then I guess my next thought went immediately to the patrons. So we had to orchestrate a very careful communication plan, and so we wound up communicating with patrons, and we offered them refunds, and we offered them credits to their accounts. And then we got kind of smart about it, and we started asking them if they wanted to donate the amount of their refund to our friends, the MCCAin organization. And we kind of started that halfway through the process. But with that, we were able to generate $13,000 worth of income. So we're kind of happy with that. But one thing that we didn't think about, it's kind of obvious now, but we didn't think about it at the time. We racked up kind of a huge expense that we're just never going to see back, and that's with credit card charges. So when you purchase an object or an item with a credit card, that organization pays anywhere from 3 to 4 to sometimes even more percent to the bank. But when you return that item, the poor organization has to pay that fee one more time. So let's say our percentage was 3%. So when you buy a ticket from MCCAin and then you refund that ticket, we have to eat 6% of that entire thing. So we've racked up quite a lot of charges that we're just not going to see back. So after we got that kind of all sorted out, that was messy, and that was panicky, and that was just very new and very stressful for the staff. And I'm proud of my staff for being able to go through all that. So then we kind of were in this wait and see mode. What's going to happen to our fall shows? And we waited for months. And meanwhile, we were working on our season brochure as if things were going to be normal. And we got all that ready to go, ready to pull the trigger. We had a 2019-2020 season planned with just big shows, because the season is commemorating our 50th anniversary, actually. So we had some pretty big shows. We had a lot of shows that were actually celebrating their 50th anniversary.
Oh my.
And then we had other shows that were celebrating other anniversary milestones. I just went out of my way to get big production shows that were sharing their 50th anniversary, special shows, so the time came when it was clear that we had to cancel those plans to keep everybody safe. And that was when the ban on large gatherings started to appear. And so when it became clear that it just wouldn't be safe to have large gatherings in MCCAin auditorium again, went back to communicating with the agents. And the good news there, though, is most of the shows that we had to cancel for the fall of 2019, I'm working on scheduling them for the fall of 2020. So if we're over the pandemic, we just have to wait. We just have to wait to see what the goodies are. So a lot of the shows we'll be able to see in the fall of 2021 if the pandemic is over. So then it became, the second, again, communicating with the patrons is important. But that was a lot easier because the shows in the fall had not been announced yet. So there weren't, refunds to consider and those types of things. So kind of the silver lining in all of that is that the fall of 2021, my programming is just about done. So we're going to wait and see what happens. Hopefully we can pull it off if we can get this pandemic behind us.
I remember that was always a big relief when you got the last act booked. So I'm sure that is a relief, even though you had to go through some not so good times to get to the point where you are. So you all have been at work and busy, but how is MCCAin being used while you're not participating in offering the performance series?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the university reached out to us as they were, and this happened during the summer. They were looking for alternate classrooms that were large enough so that they could house classes, large classes, and still have the college students be social distanced. And so they came into MCCAin and they measured the capacity of the stage, the dimensions, and they looked at our ventilation system, and they decided that it was safe for the music, theater, and dance students to come in and hold some of their rehearsals there. So we're happy that the college students in the music, theater, and dance program are able to use our facility when we are kind of shut down with doing events. And I just want to compliment them because I think they're doing just a really great job on sanitizing and cleaning, organizing how the students enter and exit, and all those types of COVID protocols. They're very good at that. So they're doing everything they can to keep the students, faculty, and staff safe, during this pandemic. And kind of the other silver lining that I wanted to mention is always try to look at the silver lining. MCCAin is working on expanding the lobby. So there's construction happening in our lobby right now. And so we were planning to do shows before the pandemic hit. So what were we going to do about bathrooms? Well, we were going to rent these deluxe portable, bathrooms, the ones on wheels with air conditioning and heating and things. So we were going to rent a couple of those and just have them parked, outside MCCAin, the entire year. Well, since we're not doing shows, at least for this fall, we're going to be, every time we're not doing a show, we're saving all kinds of money by not having to rent those portable bathrooms. So
that's great.
That's a silver lining.
So the whole performing arts industry is suffering, and they're all going through the problems that you have witnessed, and have anything to offer regarding the industry as a whole?
Well, I want to sort of put it into context as far as the entire arts and culture industry, I guess you could say. So according to the National Assembly of State Arts Agencies, this will surprise, I think, everybody. The value of arts and cultural production in the United States is about 4.5% of gross domestic product.
Wow.
So that means if you analyze different um, uh, industries, that the arts contribute more than industries such as construction or transportation or tourism, agriculture, a number of other industries. So another example of impact that I want to mention briefly is if you go to a show at the T-Mobile Center, formerly the Sprint Center in Kansas City, chances are that show has been organized by an organization called Live Nation. So they've probably produced the show and sold tickets to the show and those sorts of things. So they reported their second quarter income as far as when the pandemic hit, during the pandemic, they reported second quarter income was down by 98% compared to the same period a year before. And we're talking about billions and billions of dollars just with that one company alone. So MCCAin is not that big, of course, and our quarter income went down 100%. We went down to nothing. So this is industry wide. So if you can imagine for a minute how many people that affects, and not only affects the performers, but the creative people behind it, like composers and choreographers and all the tech people who run the lights and the sounds and build the sets and the props, and the people who work at the venues, like me and my staff. And incidentally, we're down two people, kind of after the pandemic as before the pandemic. But more people, lawyers and insurance agents and truck drivers, restaurants, hotels. There's just so many people that are affected by this industry totally shutting down. So lots of layoffs. Just everything, got shut down. But there is innovation starting to happen. So, the first thing that really started happening is artists started streaming from home. That was both a good thing and a bad thing, because the artists that started streaming from home sort of left the venues out of the equation. So we were still left with no revenue, no ability to earn revenue. But we started to see outdoor performances. We can all remember watching the news, and during the shutdown in Italy, we started seeing like professional singers and cello players play from their balcony, and that was very I don't know, innovative, and kind of got to your heart a little bit. And we started to see community bands take to the streets, marching, and dancers and theater groups started performing in parks in Germany, and just kept an eye on this throughout the world to see what was happening. By the middle of the summer, we were even starting to see drive-in concerts where people would drive up in their cars and they'd view a makeshift stage, and they would either stay in their cars or get out of their cars with lawn chairs, but still, safely distance. And we're even starting to see in the United States, mostly in other parts of the world, but some in the United States, where venues are starting to open up with very limited capacity, mandatory mask wearing, no touch concessions, no intermissions, no bathrooms, frequent sanitization of high touch areas. But what a lot of venues are doing now is streaming virtual content. And that's where MCCAin kind of comes in. We have this 4-phase plan on how we're going to open up based upon kind of the nationwide data that we're seeing. And the trends in the data nationwide point to the fact that people really don't want to return to venues inside. They would rather go do arts activities outside. If they want to go inside, They'll feel comfortable once there's a vaccine. So with kind of all that in mind, we've developed a 4-phase plan.
Okay,
We'll
can I ask you if we can go over that? Because I've got a question specifically about that, Todd. So I'm going to come back to you with that question, if that's okay. And I want to ask Linda the same question that you just answered, Todd, and that is, Linda, you have to prepare your schedule in advance, just like MCCAin does. And I know at times, because I've seen your calendar of exhibitions, how hard that is to get all of those in place to present those to your patrons, the students, and our community. So can you tell us how that impacted you?
Yes, thank you, Jackie. We plan a long ways ahead. Most art museums have to do that. So for example, this week I've been in discussions about a project that would probably take place in 2026. We had a really ambitious plan for an exhibition schedule for this current academic year, which got thrown into the wind because of the pandemic. And if I could see the first slide, I'll give you a little sense of what we tried to do about that. We had a big sculpture show. The artist is named Waylon Gregory. He is a Kansas-born artist who was a really highly respected Art Deco ceramic sculptor in the earlier part of the 20th century. And I'm showing here a sort of advertisement for that exhibition. So as you can imagine, it meant quite a lot of shipping expense bringing in these sculptural pieces from around the country for the show. And we decided, with the uncertainty of having to close down for an unknown amount of time, that we couldn't in good conscience spend that kind of money to create the show in person with real objects. And so our staff decided to really make this a full force jump into virtual. And so we've been working very hard the last few months to make this a really interesting virtual exhibition. It's scheduled to open on October 13th. Our wonderful curator, Liz Seaton, is overseeing that project. She's been working on it for quite a while. And one of our designers, Luke Dempsey, who is very proficient at technology, is helping us build an extraordinary website that will allow us to do some interesting things. So we're talking about 3D views of some of the objects and integrating some really interesting public programs, again, all virtual. So that show moved virtual. If I can see the second slide. The other show we had planned for this year was an extraordinarily ambitious one called The Forms for Worlds. It represents the work of a filmmaker and visual artist named David LeBrun, and it involves these really interesting videos of ancient objects, artifacts from human history around the world. And David has taken detailed photographs of many examples and then woven them together into slow motion video transitions. So for example, in the picture you see here, a young person is looking at a Paleolithic point, a spearhead from prehistoric times. David took maybe 50 examples, photographs of 50 examples, and they transition one to another. So we had this large exhibition planned. It was really ambitious in terms of involving disciplines all across the campus in planning the programming. We were really using it to think about technology and learning, and how the visual has changed the way we do research and learn about things in the sciences, in the humanities, in just a lot of disciplines. Microsoft Corporation was very interested in this show and has been our partner in planning it. SciTech Media, a partner of K-State that helps us with a lot of technology, also very involved. But I had to make the difficult decision that with an iffy calendar and not knowing if the museum would be able to open or if audiences would feel safe coming to the galleries or to public programs this fall, I had to make the decision not to show Four Worlds this fall and spring. Instead, though, I do want to make this clear, in February, we are going to offer a teaser from this exhibition. It's postponed a couple years into the future, but in the spring of 2021, we are going to show just the piece you see here, the Paleolithic point. And so I hope some of you will get to come in and see that. And then next year, we'll offer another teaser from this project. I want to keep people apprised of what's happening with that and keep the energy going until we can actually open this show in the fall of 2022.
So Linda, the museum, the building itself is closed, but we know there's lots of work going on inside. Is it open to classes like Todd's building, like MCCAin is open? Tell us a little bit about what's going on inside.
Unfortunately, Jackie, it is not. As Todd mentioned, the campus did really rigorous studies of buildings to determine where it would be safe to have groups of students gather for instruction. And sadly, they determined that we did not have a space big enough or with airflow that was turning over fast enough for us to be authorized for classroom instruction. However, if I could see the next slide, we've had a number of instructors approach us about using the outside of our building and the wonderful meadow, the native prairie plant, sort of curated garden that a number of K-State departments helped the museum develop right on the north side of us. So for example, some instructors in modern languages thought that having students come to the museum and look at some of our window displays that I'll talk about in a minute, and also the meadow, the plants there, the ideas about the prairie, they thought we really offer a perfect place for language learning discussions. And I should add to that we're in the process of developing a whole resource for language instructors, both people who teach English as a second language and people who teach international languages, because it's a proven fact that using the visual arts to help students develop language comfort and fluency is a real win-win. It's multi-sensory. There's visual input, there's a high motivation to understand the ideas that are being discussed. So we are really a resource for language teaching and learning. And what you're seeing on screen here is in particular a Japanese language class meeting outside the museum. And then if I could have the next slide. Another project that we're developing that utilizes what people can access from the outside, we're calling Inside Out, and students are using this too. It's going to actually be unveiled right at the beginning of October. In fact, we're going to preview it for some of our closest supporters and members at the fall donor party on October 1st. So Inside Out is a bold attempt to use the museum building itself as a kind of display case. So wonderful designer, Lindsay Smith, has been working for months setting up really unique views of works of art with interesting lighting. And we have signage now that we've put outside under the windows so that as people walk around the building, they can get a sense of who the artist is and what the work is, and even be able to use their smartphone to access more information. I'm suggesting that people bring binoculars. These windows look spectacular at twilight when they're brightly lit and the sky is getting darker. And it's really fun. I did it myself to look through binoculars and be able to zero in. I think it would be a wonderful thing for families. I think young people would really enjoy it.
That's great. It looks so pretty, the lighting there to look through the windows. I think there will be a lot of people out taking a look, and I like your idea of using the binoculars. So tell us about your efforts to go virtual, or excuse me, digital during the pandemic. I know a lot of people have been talking about the things they're participating in, and tell us how you're reaching those folks.
Yeah, we have really made a big commitment to doing things online and virtually. And so we have a number of program series that have kicked off this summer and fall. Our educators are just doing an amazing job. They've got a series called Art Bites. These are very short, like 10-minute programs that someone can tune into on Zoom and learn something about a work of art in the collection. And then if I can have the next slide, another one we've premiered starting in July is called Let's Talk Art. And again, we're keeping some of these short. I think people's comfort zone watching something on Zoom is probably a bit shorter than watching it in person. So we plan on a 15-minute conversation between a curator and an artist. This is a recent one that we did with Manhattan-based artist Doug Barrett. And then people can join and submit questions for discussion too. And we've had some really good responses to this, Jackie. In fact, in most cases, we've been having better attendance at Zoom programs than we were having for our in-person programs. And we're getting people Zooming in from all over the country. It's just surprising. And I have to say, I think I should be thanking alums for that, because I think that's happening because people are passing the word that something interesting is happening at the museum at K-State and letting their friends know. So we're really excited about the public response to these, and we have some great programs coming up.
That's great. And they can access your collection too online.
Absolutely, on our website. In fact, the best thing would be to go to our website, and through that, you can access a lot of the educational material, a lot of the videos of art and artists. We're in the process of loading a lot of those onto YouTube. So that's going to get easier and easier. And as you pointed out, Jackie, the collection search.
I think for people that, we have alums, obviously, that did not experience Beach as a student. They probably have experiences, they've come back as an alum, but it's amazing to me how, Linda, you and your educators involve faculty and staff, graduate students, and how they use your material, but also how you reach out to them and help them with their research. So I think there's more going on than what people realize. And as you mentioned, they can access a lot of that through your website. So it's a wealth of information that you have and that you share with campus, our community, and even the region. Even though you focus in on Kansas art, it's not just Kansas artists. And so you have a lot to offer. I'm going to jump back now to Todd, because Todd, I'd like for you to share with us your next steps and how you're going to reconnect, and how you're going to resume normal activities, or at least what's normal activities for the time being.
Sure. I like your word reconnect, because we do have a four-phased opening plan. And phase one, we are going to do virtual shows. Some of them will be live from MCCAin stage, no live audience. They'll be free, or perhaps we'll charge for virtual tickets, but we're trying to lean towards as many of them being as free as possible. Phase two, again, would be virtual shows where they could be live or pre-packaged video streamed from another location. So not MCCAin. And again, it'd be no live audience or free or ticketed. So today, what I wanted to do is debut a new series. We're calling it MCCAin Connected, and I believe we have a couple of slides. Our first show is going to be the Wayne Goins Quintet, which will happen on October 4th. That will be a live show, no audience. We're going to do another show called Diavolo, and I think there's another slide. Yep, brought to us by Diavolo. It's called This Is Me, Letters from the Front Lines. This is actually going to be a film that we're going to stream, but notably before the film, we're going to have a pre-conversation with me and Jacques Heim, the choreographer of Diavolo, and Dr. Art de Groot, who's the director of military relations, and with K-State, and also Dr. Steve Short, who is a Manhattan pulmonologist who actually volunteered to serve at a Brooklyn hospital in New York during the height of the pandemic out in the Northeast. And I think we have a couple more slides. We're going to do a headliner, Jim Brickman, Comfort and Joy from Home. That's going to be on December 22nd. The unique thing about this is our patrons will have to buy tickets. It will be through a third-party ticketing system. But the good news is that for every ticket that is bought from a patron, we'll receive a part of that ticket money back from Jim Brickman. Next slide. Another one we'll do is called the Hip Hop Nutcracker. And again, it's the same sort of thing. Our patrons will buy a ticket through a third party, and we'll get part of that ticket price back. And I think we have a final slide. And the Choir of Man, save the date, November 11. What we want to do is on that evening is recognize MCCAin's 50th anniversary with kind of a startup event for a whole year long of celebrating MCCAin being 50 years old. So these are some guys that are going to gather together in a pub and do some dancing and singing and foot stomping in London, and it's going to be live for just our audience only. So we've got many more things in our MCCAin Connected series that will be announced. So keep watching your mailbox, your inbox, and keep watching our social media, and of course our website.
Thank you very much. Sounds like you have great things coming out to all of us. It's interesting to me how we started at the beginning of the chat, and it was almost not doom and gloom, but it was like such a surprise that we had to close. You all are so fast on your feet. I'm so impressed with everything that you continue to offer. And again, it's to that wide audience. It's our students, faculty, staff, the community, and the region. So we thank you very much for that. One of the questions that has been asked from our registrants is about sustainability. And so this is kind of taking a turn here, but we're going to discuss the financials here for a bit. So if I could have Linda address this question first, that would be great. About talk to us a little bit whether this mode is sustainable.
Well, that's a hard question, Jackie. I mean, I think all of us in the arts hope that this isn't the mode that we're in for a very long time. But so far, what I'm seeing is that people are hungry for arts content, and even though they might prefer to get it live, they will continue to come and do things. In the case of the museum, I can't really talk about financial sustainability without bringing up the term endowment. Some people may not realize that the Beach Museum is kind of a public-private partnership in the sense that we actually get only a certain percentage of our budget. For it doesn't even pay for half of our staff from the state, from the university. All of our programming money, everything that helps us carry out our mission is from gifts that people give us, our annual Friends memberships, and the income we get from endowments that have been established for us at the foundation, the KSU Foundation. That endowment money has to grow for us to be sustainable in the future. There is no other way. And so our hope is that over the next few months, we can work on thinking about strategies for better getting that message out to arts supporters.
Thank you. Todd, would you address that same question, please? You're on mute, Todd.
Thank you. I made the first mute mistake. I'm sorry, everybody.
That's okay.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked the question. It's not a comfortable subject to talk about, but it is important. I like to think about MCCAin's finances as kind of a three-legged stool. So maybe the first leg would be we do get a little bit of money from the state, and that basically covers maybe 3 employees, not quite 3 employees. We do get a little bit of money from the Student Government Association. So those two together is probably about anywhere from 15 to 20% of our total budget. It's kind of a moving target. Then the second leg of the stool would be our actual earned revenue. And that I'd like to think of that as about 55% of our revenue. So that's, ticket income and ticket fees and rental income and those types of things. Then the third leg of the stool is private fundraising, and that's somewhere around 25% usually of our total budget. And that, of course, that's individual giving and sponsorships and fundraisers. And so as far as sustainability, one leg of that stool has been totally wiped out. So, we'll be able to balance maybe on 2 legs here for a little while, but, eventually the whole thing just, will just kind of topple over. So just like Linda says, we do need to visit about some long-term strategies to raise the level of our private fundraising with individuals and fundraisers, and we'll probably have to dip in quite a bit, if not deplete totally our reserved funds that we have housed at the foundation if this goes on for too much longer. So this model is not sustainable, but we do hope that some of these virtual ideas we have will generate a new revenue model, but it certainly won't replace the earned revenue we get from live events and rental events.
Okay, I'm not sure everybody that's with us today is familiar with the collaborations of the Beach and MCCAin. So Linda, do you want to talk about what you and Todd have worked on together to offer your patrons and the folks that follow you?
We collaborate a lot, Jackie. It's been a really great partnership. If I could have the last slide, please. This is a picture of a group of MCCAin and Beach supporters who went with Todd and I on the 2019 Arts Adventure to Los Angeles. We've made several of these arts adventure trips. I think this was actually the 3rd one we've done. In this slide, you see them in front of the historic Eames House. legendary mid-century designers, Charles and Ray Eames, designed and built this house basically out of hardware store off-the-shelf materials. We got to go in it. It's not open to the public, but through the connections that we had, we were able to get our group inside. Todd was able to get us into a number of performing arts treat experiences because of his connections. And that's what we try to do on these trips, to offer people something that money couldn't buy, in a sense, that they can only do because they are art supporters and by the connections we have.
And the folks that are pictured there in front of the Eames house, it's just amazing. Every time I run into one of those folks, they're mentioning those trips and how nice they are. So I just want to really thank you, Linda and Todd, for being with us. You offer us so much. And you mentioned that people are very hungry for the arts. I think there's so much to the arts that help us understand life and what's going on around us, that we're in a time where it's difficult to understand what's going on. So more than ever, the arts are very important. And I know you all take pride in bringing that information to folks to help them handle things like what we're going through now. So I really want to thank the two of you for spending time and for everything that you do. You have allowed us in a smaller community to have access to big city culture. And we have a great reputation here in Manhattan about our city university experience and the relationship with we have, and you all have really added to that. So we want to thank you. Sorry to say we're out of time. We haven't gotten to all of the questions, but those of you who have asked questions, you will be getting information about the question that you've asked. We've had a great time here with all of you. Thanks for signing up and registering for the Wildcat Chats. There's so much that's going on campus, even though we hear about how everything's closed and socially distancing. We need to remember that our students are still in class, and that we have other arts on campus. For example, K-State School of Music, Theater, and Design. They have their students, and as Todd mentioned, they're in MCCAin for some of their classes, socially distanced. But they also are planning some things that I think will interest you. They're working hard to provide a way for students to perform and show their skills during these COVID times. So please check out the K-State website, and you can find out about a podcast series that will begin October 15th. And there will be a performance of Macbeth. So you can link into that information on the university website. I hope you've enjoyed the Wildcat Chat today. I certainly have. If you have ideas for chats that you think would benefit others, please let us know. You can let the Alumni Association know. The Alumni Association is who provides these chats for us. So let them know. Watch for future chats on kstate.com, and we look forward to seeing you again. Thanks so much for joining us.